Don't forget that you're listening to Nightmare. Hello to everyone who comes across this experience. I found this channel not long ago thanks to the videos about paranormal events involving police officers. I've been a municipal officer for 15 years, and I have countless stories I'd like to share with you over time. However, the most intense ones happened while I was working alongside Ignacio, an exceptional partner. He was much more than just a good cop. He was the kind of man who, no matter what might happen, was always willing to investigate cases where reason simply wasn't enough. And sometimes, what we found went far beyond anything the human mind could comprehend. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had seen disturbing things on the job before, but what I witnessed in that house was beyond anything I was prepared for. The image of that boy, suspended unnaturally in the air, played over and over in my mind. His voice, distorted and layered, like multiple people screaming through him, echoed in my ears. I was terrified to close my eyes, because every time I did, I saw his trembling body floating, and I could feel the pressure in the room, as if something else was there with us, something invisible, but taking up every corner. The next day, Ignacio didn't say a word about it. He asked me not to bring it up again, to let it end there. But it wasn't that simple. Some things just don't go away, and that was only the beginning. Weeks passed before I experienced something similar, but my perception had already changed. Night patrols began to feel different. On some streets, especially the more isolated or abandoned areas, I noticed how the temperature would suddenly drop for no reason. Ignacio seemed to feel it too, though he never said anything. One night, while we were watching over an abandoned construction site, we clearly heard someone crying inside. But it wasn't the cry of an adult. It was a child. We entered with our weapons drawn, but found no one. Strangely, on our way out, Ignacio left a coin near the entrance and whispered something under his breath. I didn't ask, but I realized then that he already knew. Not everything we came across during patrol was human. One early morning, we got a report about an accident on a side road. When we arrived, there were no vehicles, just a man standing in the middle of the road, bleeding from his forehead. He said he had crashed into something huge with white eyes. As the paramedics treated him, he explained that the figure had appeared out of nowhere, and when he swerved to avoid it, he lost control. He claimed it had no face, just a massive, glowing head. We searched the area, but found no signs of impact, only strange marks in the dirt, as if something had been crawling in circles. Ignacio, looking more serious than usual, said, "This isn't the first time someone crashes here because of something that isn't there." Then he lit a small candle he always carried and placed it on a rock. I never knew why, but from that night on, I started doing the same. Over time, I began to notice changes in myself. It wasn't just fear of what we might encounter. It was a kind of sensitivity. Places that once felt ordinary now filled me with instant unease. Just walking past certain abandoned houses made my neck sting or brought tears to my eyes for no reason. Ignacio taught me to trust that feeling. He said there are things that feed on fear, that mimic voices or faces to lure the living. One night, during a patrol in a nearly deserted village, I heard my mother's voice calling me from inside a dark house. I froze. Ignacio shouted at me not to look, to keep walking. That's when I knew. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't anyone. It was something trying to get me inside. And if Ignacio hadn't been there, I would have gone in. The last time I patrolled with Ignacio was a few months before he retired. We got a report about strange noises coming from an old cemetery on the edge of town. No one wanted to go, but we did. When we arrived, the door to the small chapel was wide open, and from inside we could hear prayers, but they were repetitive, mechanical, like a recording. Ignacio went in first and told me to stay in the car, but I didn't listen. I followed him inside and saw him kneeling in front of a figure, a woman dressed in mourning black, completely still. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were pitch black. In that moment, my flashlight exploded. Everything went dark. I only remember Ignacio shouting something in Latin, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was back in the patrol car, with him beside me. He told me not to ask, that if I ever heard someone calling to me from a grave, I should never answer, not ever. When we focused the flashlight more closely on the tree, we noticed the black shape had a disturbingly human form, but with distorted proportions, elongated limbs, as if arms and legs dangled at impossible angles. One of the men insisted the figure had been moving before we arrived, even claiming to have heard its labored breathing. Ignacio didn't hesitate. He walked slowly toward the trunk while the rest of us watched in silence. The stillness in that ravine was so heavy you could hear the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. As he got closer, the figure gave a dry, weightless leap to a lower branch, revealing for a brief moment something that still haunts me to this day. A woman's face, but without eyes, without a mouth, with skin stretched tight like an old mask glued to a skull. And in her arms, she held a bundle wrapped in a baby's blanket. One of the men shouted, "It's the baby!" and lunged toward the tree, but the figure drifted back through the branches as if floating, disappearing into the darkness of the forest within seconds. The chaos was immediate. Some ran after it, others threw stones into the air, and a few broke down, crying or praying. We tried to calm people down, but fear gripped the crowd. We had all seen it. No one dared to say exactly what it was, but deep down we all knew. It wasn't human. Ignacio told me to stay put, not to follow him. "You don't deal with things like this using guns," he whispered, his hand trembling as he reloaded his flashlight. I felt something crushing my chest, like all the air had thickened, as if that ravine didn't belong to us anymore. Ignacio and another officer climbed the firmer side of the ravine, while the rest of us stayed behind, guarding the townspeople, who were still shouting in the underbrush. It took nearly 15 minutes for them to return. No trace of the figure, but they came back with the baby's blanket. It was dirty, torn, and stained with red blotches I didn't dare identify. The mother let out a gut-wrenching scream when she saw it, one that echoed across the entire neighborhood when we returned. That was one of the worst moments I've lived through in service. Not just because of what happened, but because of the helplessness. There was no sign of the baby. That creature was never seen again. The report classified it as an unresolved disappearance, but we, all of us who were there that night, we know what we saw, what we heard, what we felt. No patrol car, no matter how well equipped, can protect you from what dwells in places like that. A few days later, Ignacio confessed to me that it wasn't his first encounter with a witch. He used the word without sarcasm, without mockery. He said there had been similar reports before, in isolated rural areas or on remote roads, but that few people had ever seen these entities up close. They're not always after children, he told me. Sometimes it's worse when they come for adults, because adults don't just vanish. They come back. But they're not the same. He warned me, if I was ever alone and felt someone watching me from a rooftop or a tree, I should never look up. Ignore it, he said, because if you ever see their full face, then you can't escape. It gets inside you. It stays with you, like a shadow glued to your mind. Since then, every time I hear a noise in the middle of the night, I remember that tree and the hollow crack of branches breaking. I never found out what happened to the baby's mother. They told me she moved away soon after. She couldn't keep living in that neighborhood. As for me, that experience changed the way I patrol forever. Now I know there are things the radio can't report, things you won't see on camera or write in a report. Sometimes I feel that eyeless face still watching me in my dreams. I try to ignore it, but there are nights when I wake up suddenly, convinced that something ran across my roof. I don't dare go outside. I don't even look out the window. Ever since I met Ignacio and saw what's out there, I've learned one thing. There are things that should never be named, things that don't care about justice or authority. And the worst part is, once you turn your back on them, they already know who you are.
What happened next still haunts me like a recurring nightmare. Every time I close my eyes, I relive the scene with chilling clarity. From between the branches where we had been so sure nothing else could come, something fell. At first, it looked like a doll, just a lifeless object. But the horrifying truth hit me when one of the men lunged to catch it. It was the baby. His small body dropped like a sack of potatoes, limp and lifeless. Fear froze my soul. Then I heard Ignacio's gunshot. He fired at that thing, and it let out a blood-curdling screech. With an unnatural leap, the figure jumped from one tree to another. Before I could process what was happening, we were all running. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. And then I heard it, the baby's cry. The same cry I thought was lost now echoed in desperation. But what the hell was going on? For a brief moment, the baby seemed alive. There were no visible wounds. He was just unconscious. But when the men brought him back to his mother, I felt something far more terrifying than fear. That thing, the creature that had been stalking us, hadn't disappeared. Something worse was waiting. We rushed to follow the trail, pushing deeper and deeper into the dark forest. The full moon lit the path, but with every step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Suddenly we reached a small mound of stones, and there, like melting into the shadows, the figure vanished. The radio brought us a false sense of relief. The baby was safe, taken to the hospital. But something twisted inside me, a gut feeling that this wasn't over, that something far darker was still out there, watching all of us.
We went further into the hill. Ignacio stopped, pointing toward what looked like the entrance to a burrow. The air grew thicker, as if the place itself wanted to swallow us. I didn't dare ask what he saw, but the silence was suffocating. Ignacio handed me his gun. I didn't understand the urgency, but I took it without question. The entrance reeked of death, of decay. As I stepped inside, I felt like everything was watching me. Unseen eyes lurking in the shadows. I moved forward with the flashlight, but saw nothing, or at least, nothing I could see. The sound of my footsteps echoed strangely, as if something was waiting for me to go deeper, something in the dark. I tightened my grip on the gun, just to feel its weight, to know it was still there. But the fear didn't go away. It only grew stronger. When I finally crawled out of the burrow, a wave of dread crashed over me. The descent was harder than I expected, and the feeling that something, or someone, might push me down made me shiver. It was like the place wanted me to fall into its belly, to become part of it. But the worst was yet to come. At the bottom, Ignacio shone his flashlight on a trail of blood, and a sharp jolt of horror ran down my spine. We weren't the only ones who had been there. The trail led us to a shadowy bend where the earth looked disturbed. A heavy sense of dread settled over me, and I realized we weren't just looking for the baby. We were chasing something much older, something that wouldn't stay buried. And then, a scream. From someone who wasn't there. I felt it in the air. The next day, the reporter I trusted with my story never truly believed what had happened. She wrote about poverty, drugs, topics that couldn't possibly explain what we had witnessed that night. Ignacio, however, understood faster than I did. His silence, his way of detaching from everything, left me unsettled. Our superiors didn't even mention the real reason behind our patrol that night, and the report was filed as a simple attempted kidnapping. At first, I was angry at Ignacio for hiding the truth, but over time, I came to understand that we weren't meant to face something like that. He already knew what was at stake. No one wanted to know the truth. And that pistol I still keep, the one Ignacio gave me, has never stopped reminding me that there are things far worse than a simple police report. Something is watching me, and I know that one day, when I least expect it, it will come for me, just like it came for all the others.